When we picture the medieval world, our minds almost instinctively wander to Western Europe. Muddy village roads, feudal lords ruling over agrarian estates, and knightly orders asserting power through broadswords. We tend to view sophisticated financial engineering, paper currency, and sprawling urban consumer culture as modern phenomena born during the European Renaissance or the Western Industrial Revolution. However, if you were to step back roughly 1,000 years into the heartland of Song Dynasty China, you would encounter a world that feels eerily modern. You would see crowded metropolitan streets illuminated by paper lanterns long after midnight, citizens ordering specialized restaurant food, young scholars cramming for standardized competitive examinations to secure state jobs, and merchants conducting high-value trades not with sacks of gold or silver, but with printed slips of paper currency. Yet, this groundbreaking economic transformation was not driven by an enlightened vision of free market capitalism. It was forced into existence by a crippling, unglamorous systemic failure. The imperial economy had grown so rapidly that the state literally ran out of metal, coins. To understand how an entire civilization transitioned from heavy metallic currency to paper banknotes, we have to look at the unique foundations laid at the start of the Song dynasty. Following decades of internal warfare and regional fragmentation after the fall of the Tang dynasty, the founders of the Song unified the empire under a distinct philosophy. Learning from past military coups, the imperial court deliberately stripped power from aristocratic warlords and handed the keys of state governance to a civilian bureaucracy. At the same time, an agricultural shift was underway across the countryside. The introduction of early ripening, drought-resistant rice strains from Southeast Asia allowed farmers to harvest 2 or even 3 crops a year from the same plot of land. Agricultural yields expanded significantly, generating a massive food surplus. This surplus freed up millions of people from subsistence farming, fueling rapid urbanization. Capital cities like Kaifeng and later Hangzhou grew into bustling megacities with populations exceeding 1 million people, at a time when the largest cities in Europe held only tens of thousands. Now imagine trying to power a hyper-commercialized, fast-paced urban economy using a currency system that weighs as much as a stack of iron weights. Suppose you wanted to travel to a regional market to purchase wholesale textiles, timber, or tea. Instead of swiping a card or handing over a stack of lightweight banknotes, you had to load a wooden cart with hundreds of pounds of iron discs, hire guards to protect it, and haul that weight across mountain passes. Every transaction required physical labor just to transport the medium of exchange. In the southwestern region of Sichuan, this was not a hypothetical inconvenience. It was everyday reality. Because copper was scarce in the region, local imperial authorities mandated the use of iron coins for transactions. Iron, however, was worth significantly less than copper by weight. To buy a single bolt of high-grade silk, a merchant might need to hand over dozens of pounds of iron coins. The sheer physical weight of money became a tax on commerce, choking trade in one of the empire's most productive valleys. This physical bottleneck triggered a shift in how value was managed, exposing an underlying structural challenge facing the imperial government. From an analytical perspective, the Song state was operating under a delicate balance of competing pressures. It needed to extract tax revenue across vast distances, defend its borders against powerful northern empires, and sustain a growing class of educated bureaucrats who ran the administrative state. Unlike earlier European feudal systems that relied on local lords to raise peasant levies in times of war, the Song dynasty maintained a massive centralized standing army. Hundreds of thousands of professional soldiers were stationed along the northern frontiers. These troops were paid in cash and grain directly by the central government. Moving thousands of tons of heavy bronze and iron coins from southern tax centers to northern military garrisons was a logistical nightmare that consumed enormous resources. Furthermore, physical copper coins were constantly draining out of the domestic financial system. Large quantities of metal were melted down to craft sacred bronze statues for temples, hoarded by wealthy households as a secure store of value, or exported overseas to trade partners in Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia, where Chinese bronze coins were prized as reliable currency. The central government faced a perpetual shortage of physical liquidity. It was in this environment of monetary stress that private society invented a workaround that would eventually transform global finance. The historical timeline of paper money unfolded over several distinct stages, moving from private innovation to state takeover, and ultimately to monetary crisis. The story began in the commercial hub of Chengdu, Sichuan. Frustrated by the burden of lugging iron coins to market, 16 prominent local merchant houses devised a joint arrangement. A merchant could bring heavy iron coins to a secure private warehouse and deposit them. In return, the warehouse owner issued a stamped, handwritten paper receipt specifying the amount deposited. These private deposit receipts were known as jiaozi. Initially, jiaozi were simply claims on physical metal held in storage. If a merchant wanted to make a purchase, he could take the paper receipt back to the warehouse, retrieve his iron coins, and pay the seller. But merchants quickly realized something far more convenient. Instead of making constant trips to the warehouse, they could simply pass the paper receipt directly to the seller as payment. As long as the trading community trusted that the issuing merchant house held the real metal in its vaults, the paper receipt itself functioned as currency. For decades, this private system operated successfully based on mutual trust and local reputation. However, the system eventually ran into trouble. A few issuing houses mismanaged their reserves or issued more receipts than they had iron in storage, leading to run-ins with creditors and localized financial panics. This instability caught the attention of the imperial court. In the year 1024, the Song government made a historic decision. It banned private issuance and nationalized the paper money system. Recognizing that controlling the creation of money offered immense financial and administrative leverage, the imperial state established an official government printing office in Chengdu, launching the world's first state-backed paper currency. To make government jiaozi secure and trustworthy, the state established standardized production methods. Notes were printed on durable paper made from mulberry bark, stamped with multicolored inks, and marked with complex official seals and intricate artwork to prevent counterfeiting. The government declared that the notes were legal tender, set clear expiration dates for specific series to rotate old notes out of circulation, and established localized reserves of metallic coin to back the paper issues. For over a century, the government-managed paper system helped stabilize regional trade. But the supreme test of paper currency arrived in the 12th century, during a devastating geopolitical crisis known as the Jingkang incident. In 1127, the Jin dynasty invaded from the north, captured the capital city of Kaifeng, and took the emperor captive. The surviving members of the Song court were forced to retreat south of the Yangtze River, establishing a new capital at Hangzhou and initiating the period known as the Southern Song dynasty. The loss of northern territory was a catastrophic blow. The empire lost vast agricultural lands, crucial trade routes, and key northern copper mines. Facing war expenses and a drastically reduced tax base, the Southern Song court turned to paper money as a survival mechanism. They issued a new nationwide paper currency known as Huizi. Unlike early jiaozi, which were constrained by strict reserves and regional limits, Huizi were printed in unprecedented quantities to pay frontline soldiers, purchase military supplies, and cover central administrative costs. For several decades, paper money allowed the Southern Song to maintain a formidable defense and fund a powerful river navy, preserving their state against external threats. However, as military pressure intensified from the Jin dynasty and later from the expanding Mongol Empire, the imperial treasury ran critically low on real assets. The government increasingly turned to the printing presses to fund budget deficits without sufficient metallic reserves backing the notes. The outcome was classic monetary depreciation. As the quantity of paper in circulation far outstripped the real economic output of the empire, the purchasing power of Huizi plummeted, triggering widespread inflation and eroding public trust in imperial paper promises. For the ordinary person living through the Song dynasty, this economic and monetary shift profoundly reshaped daily existence. The commercial explosion transformed the physical layout and culture of Chinese cities. In earlier dynasties, urban markets were strictly regulated, enclosed by walls, and shut down at dusk under strict government curfews. During the Song era, those physical walls broke down. Markets spilled into neighborhoods, and cities developed round-the-clock commercial districts. A urban worker, clerk, or artisan in Hangzhou or Kaifeng could walk down lit streets at midnight to buy hot street food, tea, or everyday household goods. The widespread availability of paper currency, combined with the rapid adoption of woodblock printing, fueled a surge in literacy and popular culture. Standardized study guides, agricultural manuals, medical texts, and popular literature were mass-produced and sold at affordable prices to an expanding literate public. This vibrant commercial life was tied to the imperial examination system, the Keiju. For an ordinary family, the primary path to social mobility was educating a son so he could pass these grueling, multi-tier examinations on Confucian classics, law, and administration. Hundreds of thousands of candidates from across the empire spent years studying under candlelight, competing for a limited number of civil service credentials. This exam-driven meritocracy created a society that valued literacy, administrative process, and written documentation, providing the social foundation necessary for a paper-based financial system to function. However, living in a paper-based economy also introduced new vulnerabilities for everyday citizens. When the imperial state overissued paper currency to fund military campaigns, ordinary people felt the burden through rising food and fuel prices. A merchant or market vendor who accepted paper notes for goods might find that those same notes lost value over a matter of months. During periods of severe military crisis and currency inflation, citizens routinely attempted to convert their paper notes back into silver, bronze, silk, or grain, leading to localized runs on local government offices and financial panics. When evaluating this era, economic historians often debate the true nature of the Song commercial revolution. It is tempting to frame Song China as an early modern miracle, a proto-capitalist society that anticipated Western financial innovations by centuries. However, a closer look reveals a more complex reality. While the Song dynasty achieved impressive levels of urbanization, monetization, and technological advancement, it operated under distinct structural limitations. Some historical analyses point out that the Song economy was never a free market capitalist system in the modern sense. The imperial government maintained strict monopolies over essential industries, including salt, tea, alcohol, and heavy mining. The state controlled key trade channels and frequently intervened in market affairs to secure its own revenue. Furthermore, the creation of state paper money was not purely an embrace of monetary theory. It was a powerful tool of state centralization. Paper currency allowed the imperial court to extract real goods, labor, and military supplies from the population by issuing paper claims, avoiding the logistical burden of minting and transporting physical metal. Crucially, the paper money system lacked institutional constraints to enforce fiscal discipline. There was no independent central bank or judicial framework capable of stopping the emperor and his ministers from printing excess money during a crisis. When the state faced existential threats, it prioritized immediate survival over long-term monetary stability, ultimately leading to currency collapse. Paper money was not a permanent economic miracle, but rather a flexible social contract between an authoritative state and its subjects that functioned smoothly only as long as the state maintained public trust and fiscal discipline. The history of the Song dynasty shows us that major financial innovations are rarely born out of abstract theoretical design. More often, they are forged under the pressure of physical necessity, resource constraints, and state survival. The invention of paper currency resolved an immediate physical problem, the scarcity and weight of metal coinage, and helped unleash an urban commercial boom. At the same time, it exposed society to the structural risks of fiat currency, inflation, and state power. Looking back at this pivotal era in economic history, do you think paper money was an inevitable solution to the physical limits of commodity trade? Or was it primarily a risky tool of state expansion that was bound to destabilize the economy once fiscal discipline broke down? Share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below, and let's continue the discussion.